They smirked and said, "Disappear from our lives, that's your wedding gift." I didn't beg. I walked out. By dawn, I listed their safety net estate and froze the $1 million fund. I am Madeline. I am 29 years old, and for my entire life, I have been the invisible pillar holding up the Kensington family's perfect, fragile facade. If you live anywhere near the wealthy suburbs of Boston, you might know my family, or at least the version of them they sell to the public. My mother, Valerie, is a woman whose mood is entirely dictated by how many country club invitations she receives in a month. My father, Bradley, is a man who considers a slightly wrinkled suit a moral failing, but will happily look the other way when it comes to actual ethics. And then there is Cameron, my older brother. He is 32 years old, the undisputed golden child of the family, a man who has never once in his life had to deal with the consequences of his own actions because there was always someone else to clean up his messes. That someone was usually me. I grew up as what therapists call a glass child. You know the type. The kid who is so painfully reliable, so aggressively self-sufficient, that the parents just look right through them. While Cameron was getting bailed out of expensive boarding school scandals and crashed cars, I was sitting in my room, getting straight A's and quietly learning how the real world worked. I grew up, got my degree, and became a certified public accountant. A CPA. I built a life that was quiet, structured, and bulletproof. I had flawless credit, zero debt, and an absolute understanding of financial law. My parents did not care about my career until 7 years ago, when they suddenly needed it to survive. 7 years ago, my father made some incredibly arrogant, incredibly stupid decisions with his business partners. I will not bore you with the dense financial jargon, but the short version is that he was staring down the barrel of a massive tax fraud investigation. He was about to lose everything. The government was getting ready to seize assets, freeze accounts, and publicly ruin the pristine Kensington name. My parents panicked. In the dead of night, they came to my small apartment, crying, begging, playing the family loyalty card as hard as they could. They needed a safe harbor. They needed someone with a spotless financial record, no ties to my father's business, and the legal knowledge to hold their wealth securely until the statute of limitations ran out and the heat died down. They needed me. So, I became the fixer. I set up the legal structures. They transferred their safety net fortune, exactly $1.78 million, into a joint investment account where I was the primary account holder. Then, they transferred the deed of their prized possession, a luxury downtown penthouse overlooking the harbor, entirely into my name. On paper, I was a young, wildly successful millionaire. In reality, I was just the vault. I managed their money, paid their property taxes, and silently watched as they continued to live their lavish lifestyle using credit cards that were ultimately backed by my name and my pristine credit score. They promised me it was temporary. They promised me I was their savior. But years passed, the legal trouble faded, and the arrangement just became the new normal. They loved the convenience of having me manage the boring details while they swiped the plastic. I became nothing more than a human ATM and an unpaid wealth manager. They stopped saying thank you. In fact, they started treating me like an employee who was severely underperforming. Which brings us to the wedding. Cameron was getting married to Chelsea. Chelsea was the kind of woman who genuinely believed that her Pinterest board was a legally binding document. They were planning a wedding that looked less like a celebration of love and more like a theatrical production designed to make other rich people jealous. And of course, the bills were being routed through the accounts I managed. I was the one watching the numbers dwindle. I was the one trying to pull the reins on a runaway carriage. And I was about to find out exactly what my family thought of my efforts. It was Thursday night, exactly 2 days before the wedding. The actual rehearsal dinner was scheduled for Friday, but my mother had insisted on a private family dinner at the penthouse to finalize the last-minute logistics. I drove 45 minutes from my quiet apartment in the suburbs into the city, parked in the underground garage, and took the private elevator up to the top floor. The penthouse smelled of expensive catered roasted lamb and suffocating tension. The dining table was covered in floral swatches, seating charts, and vendor contracts. My mother, Valerie, was pacing around with a glass of white wine, her lips pressed into a thin, white line. My father was sitting at the head of the table, massaging his temples. Cameron and Chelsea were sitting on the plush velvet sofa, looking like they had just been told a peasant was breathing their air. I took a seat and pulled out my tablet. "We need to talk about the final vendor payments," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "The catering company needs their final wire transfer by tomorrow morning, or they won't load the trucks. And the florist is threatening to pull the contract because the budget has been exceeded by nearly $20,000. Chelsea let out a dramatic, high-pitched sigh. She dropped her head onto Cameron's shoulder. "Maddie, you are completely ruining the vibe right now," she whined. "We already agreed we need the imported peonies. The local ones look cheap. And we decided to add the custom ice bar for the cocktail hour." I looked at my brother. "Cameron, an ice bar is another $8,000. I told you last week, the account allocated for the wedding is stretched to its absolute limit. If we pay for the ice bar and the extra flowers, the check for the venue itself is going to bounce." Cameron rolled his eyes. He didn't even look at me, he just addressed my mother. "Mom, can you please tell your daughter to stop acting like a stingy accountant for 5 minutes? It's my wedding. It's supposed to be perfect." My mother stopped pacing and turned to me. Her eyes were cold, sweeping over my simple work blouse and slacks like I was a stain on her expensive rug. "Madeline, do not be difficult. Just move the money from the secondary reserve. It is not that complicated. The secondary reserve is for the property taxes on this penthouse, Mom," I explained, trying to keep the exhaustion out of my voice. "Taxes are due next month. If I drain that to pay for an ice sculpture, we are going to get hit with massive penalties. You guys need to prioritize." My father finally spoke, his voice dripping with that quiet, authoritative condescension he saved just for me. "Madeline, you are entirely too obsessed with rules. Your brother is getting married. This is a reflection of the Kensington family. We do not cut corners. Just make the transfer." I felt a familiar, dull ache in my chest. It was the ache of being the only adult in a room full of aging toddlers. "I am not obsessed with rules, Dad. I am obsessed with keeping you all out of bankruptcy. You cannot spend money you do not have." Chelsea scoffed loudly. "It is not your money, Maddie. Stop acting like you're the one paying for it. You're just the person who handles the paperwork." I looked at Chelsea. Then I looked at Cameron, who was smirking at her comment. Then I looked at my parents, waiting for one of them to correct her. Waiting for one of them to say, "Actually, Chelsea, Madeline saved us from losing everything. Actually, Chelsea, Madeline's credit is the only reason you are sitting in a multi-million-dollar penthouse right now." But no one said a word. The silence stretched out, thick and suffocating. "I am just trying to help," I said quietly, my voice losing its professional edge. "I have spent weeks managing these vendors, trying to keep everything afloat." Valerie slammed her wine glass down on the table. The sharp clink echoed in the large room. She walked over to me, leaning down so her face was inches from mine. I could smell the alcohol and the expensive perfume. "Help," she hissed. "You call this helping? You have done nothing but bring negativity and stress into this house for months. You sit there in your boring little outfits, judging us, acting like you are somehow better than us because you know how to read a spreadsheet. You are suffocating your brother's joy." My breath hitched. I stared at her, frozen. "In fact," Valerie continued, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm whisper, "if you really want to help, the greatest gift for your brother's wedding is if you disappear from our family forever." The room went completely, absolutely silent. You could hear the faint hum of the city traffic 14 stories below, but inside the penthouse, all the oxygen had been sucked out. I sat there, my hands resting on my tablet, processing the words. "The greatest gift is if you disappear. Forever." I looked at my father. Bradley Kensington, the patriarch, the man who had cried in my living room 7 years ago begging me to save him. He didn't meet my eyes. He suddenly found the fabric of his suit pants incredibly interesting, carefully picking off an invisible piece of lint. He was a coward. He was choosing the path of least resistance, letting his wife tear me apart so he wouldn't have to deal with a tantrum. I looked at Cameron, the golden boy, my big brother who was supposed to protect me when we were kids. He was leaning back into the sofa cushions, an unmistakable, arrogant smirk playing on his lips. He looked victorious. He had won the unspoken competition for our parents' love, and he was enjoying the execution. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up, flip the heavy mahogany dining table, and scream every ugly, hidden truth about this family until their ears bled. I wanted to remind them that without me, they would be living in a rented condo in a bad neighborhood. I wanted to cry. I felt the hot, stinging pressure of tears building behind my eyes, the desperate inner child begging for just a scrap of affection from the people who created her. But I didn't. I took a slow, deep breath, pulling the cold air into my lungs, and pushed the tears back down into the dark place where I kept all my family memories. In that exact moment, something fundamental broke inside of me. Or maybe, something finally snapped into place. The desperation for their approval, the desperate need to be seen as a good daughter, it evaporated. It was just gone. Replaced by a terrifying, absolute clarity. They didn't love me. They never had. I was a tool, an appliance, a shock absorber for their mistakes. And you do not apologize to an appliance when you unplug it. Is that all? I asked. My voice was so calm, so devoid of emotion, that it sounded like it belonged to a stranger. Valerie blinked, momentarily thrown off balance by my lack of a breakdown. She crossed her arms. Yes, that is all. We are done here. Okay, I said. I didn't beg. I didn't demand an apology. I calmly reached out, closed the cover of my tablet, and slid it into my leather tote bag. I stood up, smoothing the wrinkles out of my slacks. I picked up my cloth napkin from the table, folded it perfectly in half, and set it down next to the seating charts. Maddie, don't be dramatic, Cameron muttered, sensing that my silence was somehow more threatening than a screaming match. I didn't even look at him. I turned around and walked across the wide hardwood floor toward the front entryway. I picked up my keys from the marble console table. If you walk out that door, do not bother showing up to the rehearsal dinner tomorrow, my mother called out, her voice echoing down the hallway. It was a threat. She expected me to freeze, to turn around, to grovel. I pulled the heavy oak door open. I stepped out into the hallway. I didn't look back. I pulled the door shut behind me. The heavy click of the deadbolt locking into place echoed in the quiet hallway. It sounded like a final punctuation mark. A full stop at the end of a very long, very painful 29-year sentence. The drive back to the suburbs was a blur. The air outside was cold, the Boston night pressing against the windows of my car like iron. But inside my chest, there was no panic. There was only a quiet, dangerous fire starting to burn. They thought they had erased me. They thought kicking me out would keep me small, keep me in my place. They thought betrayal would shatter me. But betrayal doesn't always shatter a woman. Sometimes, it chisels her into something much, much sharper. They wanted me gone. I would gladly give them their wish. I would vanish. But not before I took everything that belonged to me. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm went off. The early sunlight was pouring through the blinds of my small, quiet apartment, slicing across the floor like golden bars. For the first time in my adult life, I did not wake up feeling a crushing weight of anxiety about my family. I did not immediately check my phone to see what crisis Cameron had caused overnight, or what bill my mother had forgotten to pay. The silence in my apartment was beautiful. It was clean. It was the silence of a battlefield after the enemy has completely surrendered and gone home. I walked into my kitchen and brewed a pot of dark roast coffee. I poured a mug, the steam curling up in the cool morning air, and took a sip. I was entirely awake. I felt zero guilt. Zero hesitation. I walked into my home office, a small room lined with bookshelves and filing cabinets. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a heavy, fireproof lockbox. I input the combination, popped the latch, and opened the lid. Inside lay the physical architecture of the Kensington family's fake empire. I pulled out the thick manila folders. I spread the documents across my desk. Here was the joint investment account deed, showing a current balance of exactly $1.78 million. Here were the authorization forms for the 3 premium credit cards my parents and brother used daily, cards tied directly to that investment account. And here was the master document, the property deed to the downtown penthouse, registered exclusively under the name Madeline Kensington. I traced my fingers over the signature at the bottom of the deed. I remembered the day my parents had forced me to sign it, sitting in a stuffy lawyer's office, sweating through my clothes. "Because, Madeline, you're the reliable child," my father had said, patting my hand. I smiled. A real, genuine smile. It didn't reach my eyes, but it felt incredibly good. My parents were arrogant, but worse than that, they were legally illiterate. They had spent 7 years treating me like a disposable servant, entirely forgetting the fundamental rule of giving someone absolute legal power over your life. When you cast out the gatekeeper, you leave her holding the keys to the castle. The money wasn't a trust that they controlled. It was a joint account where I was the primary. The house wasn't theirs in spirit. It was mine in the eyes of the state of Massachusetts. They wanted me to disappear. They wanted to sever ties. I was simply going to grant their wish, legally and financially. I opened my laptop and checked the time. It was 8:30 in the morning. The banks were opening. I logged into my online banking portal just to double-check the balances. My parents had been busy yesterday. There were pending charges for thousands of dollars at high-end boutiques, a charge for a luxury car detailing service, and a massive pending authorization for a high-end liquor distributor. They were spending money like water, assuming the quiet, reliable bank vault would just keep absorbing the hits. Not anymore. I gathered the folders, placed them neatly into my leather briefcase, and finished my coffee. I dressed in my sharpest, most intimidating business suit. A dark navy blazer, tailored trousers, and low heels. I looked exactly like the corporate accountant I was. I looked like a woman who was about to ruin someone's life with paperwork. I arrived at the private wealth management branch downtown at exactly 9:15. It was a sterile, quiet environment, all marble floors, frosted glass partitions, and hushed conversations. The kind of place where people spoke softly about very large sums of money. I was ushered into the office of my account manager, a man named Marcus. Marcus knew my family well. He was used to dealing with my frantic calls trying to cover my brother's overdrafts. "Madeline, good morning," Marcus said, standing up to shake my hand. "We weren't expecting you today. Is everything all right with the wedding preparations?" I sat down in the plush leather chair across from his massive mahogany desk. I placed my briefcase on my lap and clicked it open. "Good morning, Marcus." "Yes, everything is fine. But there has been a change in the family's financial structure, and I need to execute some directives immediately." I handed him the primary account paperwork. "I need to instantly remove Valerie Kensington, Bradley Kensington, and Cameron Kensington as authorized users on the primary investment account and all linked checking accounts," I stated, my voice even and professional. "Furthermore, I need to immediately cancel the 3 platinum credit cards ending in 4211, 6092, and 8804. Report them as closed by the primary cardholder." Marcus blinked, adjusting his glasses. He looked at the paperwork, then looked back at me, a hint of shock breaking through his professional demeanor. "Madeline, are you certain? If I cancel these cards, they will be declined immediately upon next use. And removing them from the joint account means they will have absolutely zero access to the $1.78 million. This is a significant action." "I am entirely certain, Marcus." I leaned forward slightly. "Those funds are legally under my primary control, correct?" "Yes, you are the primary account holder. The others are merely authorized users. You have full legal authority to revoke access." "Then revoke it. Right now, please." Marcus nodded slowly. He turned to his computer and began typing. The clacking of his keyboard was the only sound in the room. I sat perfectly still, watching the screen reflect in his glasses. "Cards are canceled," Marcus said a few minutes later. "Access to the primary investment portfolio is revoked. The funds are now entirely locked down under your sole authorization." "Thank you," I said. One more thing. I need to freeze the accounts against any outgoing wire transfers or automated clearinghouse payments that I do not personally verify by phone. Cancel all pending scheduled payments. Marcus's eyes widened slightly. He knew exactly what that meant. The caterers. The florists. The venue. Done, he said quietly, hitting the final key. I felt a rush of adrenaline, cold and sharp, flood my veins. The financial umbilical cord was cut. The heavy, suffocating weight I had carried for 7 years was gone. As of this exact second, there would be no more endless spending on champagne fountains and designer dresses for a family that despised me. Marcus printed out a stack of confirmation papers and slid them across the mahogany desk. I took my pen and signed my name on the dotted lines. The ink felt heavy, binding, and absolute. I was holding the power of law in my hands, and it felt like armor. I thanked Marcus, packed the confirmations into my briefcase, and walked out of the bank. The morning air felt crisper, brighter. But I wasn't done yet. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and found the number for a contact I had saved months ago, back when I had first started realizing my family was beyond saving. I didn't call a traditional real estate agent. Traditional agents take months. They want to stage the house, take professional photos, host open houses, and negotiate with buyers who need mortgage approvals. I didn't have months. I didn't even have weeks. I wanted a surgical strike. I drove to the sleek, modern office of a corporate real estate investment firm. An iBuyer agency. They buy luxury properties in cash, usually at a slight discount, close the deal in days, and flip them. I sat in a glass-walled conference room with an aggressive, fast-talking acquisitions director named Sarah. "This is a prime property, Madeline," Sarah said, flipping through the property tax records I had brought her. "Downtown penthouse, panoramic harbor views. It's completely unencumbered. No mortgage. But you are asking for a cash close within 7 days as is." "That is correct," I said. "I am willing to take a 12% hit on the current market appraisal if you can guarantee the funds are wired to my private account by next Friday, and if you handle the tenant eviction." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Tenant eviction? The records show your parents live there." "They're not tenants with a lease," I clarified, my voice icy. "They're occupants living there at my discretion. As of today, that discretion is revoked. I want the property sold, and I want a standard 30-day legal eviction notice served to them." Sarah studied my face for a long moment. In her line of work, she saw a lot of messy divorces and family disputes, but she rarely saw someone execute one with this level of cold, clinical detachment. She liked it. It made her job easier. "We can do that," she said, sliding a thick contract across the table. "We buy it cash. Our legal team will draft the 30-day notice to vacate. We can have it served by a courier to the penthouse this evening." I picked up the pen. I thought about my mother, sipping wine in that penthouse, telling me I was a burden. I thought about my father, sitting on furniture I legally owned, refusing to defend me. I signed the contract. "Pleasure doing business with you," Sarah said, shaking my hand. By the time I walked out of the real estate office, it was just past noon. The Kensington safety net, the multi-million-dollar illusion they paraded around Boston high society, had vanished in a puff of legal smoke. And I hadn't even raised my voice. I got back into my car and finally pulled my phone out of my bag. I had kept it on silent all morning. I tapped the screen to wake it up. There were 15 missed calls. 10 from my mother, 5 from my brother. And a flood of text messages. I sat in the driver's seat, the engine off, and opened the messages. "Cameron, Maddie, my car just declined at the tailor. The guy embarrassed me in front of my groomsmen. Fix the account now, this isn't funny. Valerie, Madeline, call the bank immediately. The florist just called saying the deposit bounced. Stop throwing a tantrum and do your job. Cameron, seriously Maddie, pick up the phone. Chelsea is freaking out. You are ruining the rehearsal day." I stared at the screen, a bitter, genuine laugh escaping my throat. Funny. Cameron thought this was a joke. For my entire life, I had been their unfunny punchline. The invisible servant. The one they could erase with a single sentence. Now, they were the ones gasping for air, scrambling in a panic they couldn't even begin to understand yet. They thought I was just throwing a tantrum. They thought I had just paused a card. They had no idea that the entire foundation of their lives had just been legally vaporized. I didn't reply. I didn't block them either. I wanted the messages to come through. I wanted a front row seat to the collapse. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat, started the car, and pulled out into the city traffic. Tomorrow was the wedding. But tonight was the rehearsal dinner, and I was going to enjoy every single second of it. Thank you for watching this story so far. If you are enjoying this drama, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below telling us which city you are watching from. Every single comment helps the video reach more people, and we truly appreciate your support. Friday afternoon arrived with a strange, heavy stillness. I was back in my apartment, sitting on my worn-out velvet sofa, watching the dust motes dance in the sunlight. My phone, sitting on the coffee table a few feet away, was vibrating so constantly that it was slowly inching its way toward the edge of the glass. I had put it on silent, but the screen kept lighting up, flashing names that used to send a spike of pure anxiety straight into my chest. Valerie, Cameron, Bradley, Chelsea. I didn't reach for it. I just watched it. If you have ever been the scapegoat in a toxic family system, you know exactly what that vibrating phone feels like. It feels like a leash. It is a reminder that no matter where you are, they can yank your chain and drag you back into their chaos. But today, the leash was cut. They just didn't realize it yet. Eventually, curiosity won out over my desire for absolute silence. I picked up the phone. I had 42 missed calls. The text messages were a chaotic, fascinating study in the psychology of entitlement. I scrolled back to the beginning of the panic, right around the time I was sitting in the real estate office. Cameron's texts were the first to shift from annoyed to slightly unhinged. Maddie, my card just declined at the tailor. The guy embarrassed me in front of my groomsmen. Fix the account now, this isn't funny. Seriously, Maddie, pick up the phone. Chelsea is freaking out. You are ruining the rehearsal day. Maddie, I just tried to pay for the groomsmen's lunch and my backup card declined too. What the hell did you do? Call me back right now. I read the word funny again. It was such a strange choice of words. Why would he think this was a joke? Because to Cameron, my pain had always been a joke. My stress was an inconvenience to him. The idea that I possessed the agency to actually fight back was so foreign to him that his brain could only process it as a prank. Then came my mother's texts. Valerie didn't do panic, she did rage. Madeline, call the bank immediately. The florist just called saying the deposit bounced. Stop throwing a tantrum and do your job. I am not playing these games with you. You are humiliating us. If you do not fix this by 3 o'clock, I am coming over there. Your father is furious. You are ruining your brother's weekend over a stupid argument. Grow up. I let out a slow exhale. Look at the language. Dear job. As if I was a hired servant. A stupid argument. As if telling your daughter you wish she would disappear forever is just a minor disagreement over dinner. This is what gaslighting looks like in its purest form. They set the house on fire, complain that you aren't putting it out fast enough, and then call you crazy for pointing out the smoke. I set the phone back down. I didn't reply to a single one. I walked into my kitchen, poured myself a glass of iced water, and looked out the window. The panic was setting in on their end, but it was still localized. They still thought it was a bank error or a temporary freeze I had put on the cards to make a point. They still thought they had the upper hand. They had absolutely no idea that a courier was currently navigating Boston traffic, carrying a legal, binding 30-day eviction notice for the penthouse they were currently getting dressed in. The dominoes were lined up. I had pushed the first one. Now, all I had to do was sit back and watch gravity do the rest. Friday evening arrived. 5 o'clock. 6 o'clock. 7 o'clock. The rehearsal dinner was scheduled for 7:30 at an exclusive, ridiculously overpriced country club just outside the city. It was the kind of place that required a membership fee equivalent to a down payment on a house, a place where people wore pastel sweaters tied around their shoulders without a hint of irony. My parents had booked the grand dining room. There was supposed to be a 5-course meal, an open bar with top-tier liquor, and a string quartet. I knew exactly what the contract looked like because I was the one who had read the fine print. And I knew the most important clause. The final balance of $12,000 had to be cleared by the automated clearinghouse system by noon on Friday, or the club reserved the right to deny service. At 7:15, my phone screen lit up with an automated email forward. Because I was the primary contact on the billing account, the country club's accounting software automatically notified me when a payment failed. Subject: urgent. Payment declined. Services suspended. I opened the email and read the beautiful, sterile corporate language. The transfer had failed. The account was locked. The club management had officially suspended the event setup. I closed my eyes and pictured the scene. I pictured my mother, wearing a designer cocktail dress she hadn't paid for, walking into the country club lobby. I pictured my father, shaking hands with the wealthy guests they were trying to impress. And then, I pictured the club manager, a man who dealt exclusively with very rich, very demanding people, politely asking my father to step aside into an office. I imagined the color draining from my father's face as his platinum cards, one after another, were swiped and declined. My phone started ringing. It was Valerie. I watched her name flash on the screen until it went to voicemail. Then, the text messages started pouring in, faster than before. The tone had completely shifted. The arrogant commands were gone, replaced by a frantic, visceral desperation. Madeline, the club manager, won't let us into the dining room. They're saying the final payment bounced. Call the bank right now. Maddie, please, people are waiting in the lobby. The caterers are threatening to pack up the food. Answer your phone. What did you do? What did you do? We are standing here like idiots. The cards are all dead. Transfer the money. I sat on my sofa, pulling a fuzzy throw blanket over my legs. The contrast was almost jarring. I was sitting in my cheap sweatpants, eating a bowl of microwaved macaroni and cheese, while the Kensington family was experiencing a catastrophic social meltdown in formal wear. Then came the text that finally made me move my fingers. It was from Valerie again. If you do not fix this right this second, you are dead to me. You will never be part of this family again. Return what you stole, or don't bother showing your face at the wedding. Return what I stole. That was rich. I was protecting my own legal assets from a group of parasites, and she was calling me a thief. I picked up the phone. I didn't want to engage in a back and forth, but I needed to send a message. I needed them to know that this wasn't a mistake. This was an execution. I opened the message thread with my mother. I typed out a single sentence. I didn't use all caps. I didn't use exclamation points. I just stated a fact. I won't be showing my face, but my absence will cost you. I hit send. Then I turned the phone face down on the table. The response to my message was instantaneous, but it didn't come from my mother. It came from my father. Bradley Kensington rarely got his hands dirty in the family conflicts. He preferred to let my mother do the screaming while he played the reasonable, disappointed patriarch. When my phone buzzed with a long message from him, I knew things at the country club had officially hit rock bottom. Madeline, this has gone far enough. Your mother is in tears in the restroom. Cameron is having a panic attack in the parking lot. Guests are starting to leave because there is no food and no open bar. I know you are upset about what was said last night, but families survive storms. We forgive each other. You do not destroy your brother's life over hurt feelings. Unlock the accounts immediately. We will discuss an apology on Monday. Do not be the villain of this story. I read the message 3 times. It was a masterpiece of covert manipulation. Notice how he minimizes the abuse, what was said last night, and hurt feelings. Notice how he shifts the blame. Do not be the villain of the story. Notice the vague, non-committal promise. We will discuss an apology on Monday. He wasn't sorry. He was just trying to negotiate with a hostage taker so he could get his credit limit back. I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, a notification popped up. It was a voice memo from Chelsea. I debated deleting it, but I hit play. The audio started with wet, gasping sobs. It was incredibly theatrical. Maddie, please, Chelsea whimpered into the microphone. I don't know what happened between you and your parents, but why are you punishing me? This is my dream weekend. Everything is ruined. The rehearsal dinner is cancelled. The guests are going to McDonald's in their suits. Please, Maddie, I'll do anything. Just turn the cards back on. I'm begging you. Don't do this to me. I listened to her cry, and I felt absolutely nothing. No pity. No guilt. I remembered Chelsea sitting on my parents' velvet sofa just 24 hours ago, rolling her eyes and telling me that I was just the person who handles the paperwork. I remembered how she smirked when my mother told me to disappear. They all wanted the benefits of my labor, but none of them wanted to treat me like a human being. They thought they could extract my resources, spit on me, and then demand I keep the money flowing. I went into my kitchen, opened a delivery app on my tablet, and ordered a massive plate of pad thai from my favorite local spot. I tipped the driver 20%. I ate my noodles on the couch, watching a mindless comedy on television. Across the city, the Kensington family was watching their empire of appearances burn to the ground. The rehearsal dinner was officially dead. The wealthy guests they had spent years trying to impress were driving away, confused, hungry, and whispering. The whispers had started. Did you hear? The Kensington's cards declined. The whole event was cancelled. In the high society circles my mother worshipped, rumors of financial ruin were worse than a terminal illness. And the best part was, the nightmare had only just begun. The rehearsal dinner was just the appetizer. Tomorrow was the main course. Tomorrow was the wedding day. The morning of the wedding, I woke up to a gray, overcast sky. It looked like it was going to rain, which felt incredibly appropriate. I made a pot of coffee, moving slowly, deliberately. I didn't have anywhere to be. I didn't have a bridesmaid dress to squeeze into. I didn't have to spend 3 hours sitting in a chair while a makeup artist tried to make me look like someone I wasn't, all while my mother criticized my posture. By 9 o'clock in the morning, my phone was a graveyard of desperate communications. I had stopped counting the missed calls. The situation on their end had escalated from panic to absolute, apocalyptic ruin. Because I had frozen the accounts and canceled the cards on Friday morning, none of the vendors for Saturday's wedding had been paid. The massive floral installations? Unpaid. The 5-tier custom cake? Unpaid. The luxury transportation, the lighting crew, the 50-piece band? Unpaid. Usually, in a crisis, a family might throw a different credit card at the problem. But my parents didn't have different credit cards. Every line of credit they possessed was tied to the portfolio I had just locked down. They had zero liquidity. They couldn't even pull cash from an ATM. At 10:30, my phone buzzed with a text from a mutual cousin, a girl named Becca who was always sweet to me and had no idea about the toxic underbelly of our family. Becca, Maddie, where are you? It's total chaos at the hotel. Are you okay? I typed back a quick reply. I'm fine, Becca. I won't be attending. What's happening? A minute later, a photo came through. It was taken from the lobby of the Grand Downtown Hotel where the reception was supposed to be held. The massive double doors to the grand ballroom were shut tight, and a velvet rope was pulled across them. The caption read, Becca, the hotel manager literally locked the ballroom. He said the final wire transfer bounced yesterday and no one will give him a working credit card. The florist trucks are sitting in the loading dock refusing to unload the flowers. Aunt Valerie is screaming at a bellboy and Cameron looks like he's going to punch a wall. It's a disaster. I stared at the photo. I zoomed in on the locked doors. I could almost hear my mother's shrill voice echoing in the marble lobby, demanding to speak to someone in charge, threatening to ruin their business, completely unaware that she was the one who had already been ruined. I replied to Becca, get out of there. Go get a nice brunch. The wedding isn't happening. I set the phone down. The financial blackout was complete. The event was dead. But as I sat there, sipping my dark roast coffee, I realized something important. Financial ruin wasn't enough. My parents were masters of spin. By tomorrow, Valerie would be telling everyone that there was a massive banking error, a victimizing glitch in the system. She would spin a narrative where they were the tragic victims of a corporate mistake. Cameron would tell his friends that the vendors breached their contracts. They would lie, they would cover it up, and they would preserve the illusion. I couldn't let that happen. Revenge isn't just about destruction. True, lasting revenge is about exposure. I needed to burn the illusion to the ground so completely that they could never rebuild it. I needed to show everyone exactly who the Kensingtons really were. I needed to bring out the receipts. I walked into my home office and sat down at my desk. I opened my laptop and cracked my knuckles. I wasn't just an angry sister anymore. I was a forensic accountant building a case for the prosecution. I opened a new, blank document. Then I opened the encrypted folders where I kept 7 years' worth of family financial history. I started compiling a PDF. I didn't use emotional language. I let the numbers tell the story. First, I pulled the bank statements from 3 years ago, the time Cameron got a DUI and crashed a leased sports car into a city light pole. My parents didn't have the cash to settle it quietly. I inserted the PDF of the wire transfer I made from my personal savings, exactly $45,000 to pay off the car dealership and the lawyer to keep it out of the papers. I highlighted the date and the amount. Next, I pulled the credit card statements from my mother's charity trips. I showed the statements where her cards carrying my name as the primary guarantor, were maxed out for $20,000 at luxury resorts in Aspen and Paris. Then, I pulled the crown jewel, the property tax records and the deed to the downtown penthouse. I took screenshots of the official state registry showing that Madeline Kensington was the sole, unencumbered owner of the property. I included the history of the $1.78 million investment account, showing clearly that I was the primary account holder, legally responsible for every cent. I assembled it all into a crisp, 10-page PDF document. It was a flawless, undeniable paper trail proving that the wealthy, aristocratic Kensington family was, in reality, completely broke. They were living paycheck to paycheck, entirely subsidized by the daughter they treated like garbage. I opened my email client. I drafted a new message. I kept the text brief, cold, and devastatingly polite. To whom it may concern, due to an overwhelming number of inquiries regarding the sudden cancellation of Cameron Kensington's wedding this weekend, I feel it is necessary to provide clarity. For the past 7 years, I have acted as the sole financial guarantor for Bradley, Valerie, and Cameron Kensington. I have legally owned their residence and funded their lifestyle using my personal credit and legal standing, as evidenced by the attached public records and financial statements. Recently, it was made clear to me that my financial contributions were required, but my presence in this family was not. I was informed that the greatest gift I could give the family was my permanent disappearance. I have chosen to honor that request. Consequently, I have withdrawn all financial support, frozen all accounts in my name, and initiated the sale of the property they currently occupy. I apologize for any inconvenience the cancellation of this wedding has caused you. I wish you all the best. Sincerely, Madeline Kensington. I attached the PDF. It felt heavy, like a loaded weapon resting on my screen. Now came the targeting. I opened the digital spreadsheet I had created months ago when I was organizing the wedding invitations. I copied the entire guest list email column. 250 email addresses. Extended family. Bradley's business associates. The girls from Valerie's country club. Chelsea's wealthy, judgmental parents. I pasted the 250 addresses into the blind carbon copy line. I typed the subject line. I wanted something that would make them open it immediately. Subject: the truth you won't hear at the wedding. I let my finger hover over the trackpad. I knew that once I clicked this button, there was no going back. This wasn't just burning a bridge. This was nuking the entire landscape. My parents would become social pariahs. Bradley's business partners would see he was a liability. Chelsea's parents would realize their daughter was marrying into a house of cards. The shame would be absolute and inescapable. I thought about the 29 years of being invisible. I thought about the time I had the flu in college and no one called. I thought about the time Cameron stole my graduation money to buy a watch, and my mother told me I was being selfish for asking for it back. I thought about the word disposable. I pressed down on the trackpad. Click. The email vanished from my outbox. It took exactly 4 minutes for the fallout to begin. It started as a trickle, then turned into a digital avalanche. My phone, still sitting on the desk, began vibrating so hard it sounded like an angry hornet. But this time, it wasn't just my parents calling. It was aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends. An email reply popped up from my Aunt Diane, my father's sister, who had always suspected my parents were living beyond their means. Diane, oh my God, Maddie. I am reading this PDF. Did you really pay off a $45,000 settlement for Cameron? Is the penthouse really yours? We are all standing in the hotel lobby reading this. Bradley is refusing to look anyone in the eye. Another text from Becca, the cousin. Becca, Maddie. Holy shit. Everyone is reading the email on their phones. Chelsea's dad just got into a screaming match with Uncle Bradley in the middle of the lobby. He called him a fraud. Chelsea is sobbing. A few minutes later, Becca sent another photo. This one is burned into my memory forever. It was taken outside the hotel on the city sidewalk. The sky had finally started to rain a light, miserable drizzle. Chelsea was standing by the curb in her massive, ridiculously expensive white wedding gown. The hem was dragging in a muddy puddle. She had her hands over her face, her shoulders shaking, crying uncontrollably. Cameron was standing next to her, his tuxedo jacket off, his tie undone, screaming into his cell phone. Behind them, through the glass doors of the hotel, I could see my mother. Valerie was sitting on a luggage cart, her face buried in her hands, completely defeated. The perfect family. The golden child. The flawless facade. It was all gone, washed away in the rain and a 10-page PDF document. I saved the photo to my phone. Not to gloat, but as a reminder. Whenever I felt a twinge of guilt, whenever society tried to tell me that family is everything, I would look at that photo and remember that I didn't break them. They were already broken. I just finally turned on the lights. I closed my laptop, walked into my living room, and lay down on the couch. For the first time in a week, I closed my eyes and fell into a deep, dreamless, peaceful sleep. Sunday evening. The weekend was officially over. The wedding that never happened was now just a massive, smoking crater in the social landscape of Boston. I was in my kitchen, boiling water for tea. The apartment was quiet. The frantic phone calls had finally slowed down, mostly because there was nothing left to say. The truth was out. The money was gone. The war was over. But I knew there would be one final skirmish. People who lose everything don't just vanish quietly into the night. They cling. They beg. They lash out. At exactly 6:30, the knock came. It wasn't a polite knock. It was 3 heavy, demanding strikes against the wood of my front door, vibrating the walls of my small entryway. I stood in the kitchen, listening to the low hiss of the kettle. I didn't rush. I poured the hot water over my tea bag, watched the water turn a deep amber, and took a slow breath. I knew exactly who it was. I walked to the front door and looked through the peephole. It was like looking at a distorted, ruined painting of the people I used to know. My mother, Valerie, stood in the front. Her normally flawless hair was flat and stringy. Her makeup was smudged, dark circles prominent under her eyes. She looked 10 years older than she had on Thursday night. Behind her stood my father, his shoulders slumped, his expensive coat looking suddenly too big for him. And Cameron. Cameron looked feral. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might shatter. Madeline. Valerie's voice was muffled through the heavy door. It wasn't commanding anymore. It was shrill, laced with panic. Open this door. We know you're in there. Maddie, open the damn door. Cameron yelled, hitting the wood with the flat of his hand. I unlocked the deadbolt, but I kept the heavy metal security chain attached. I opened the door just a few inches, enough to see them face to face, but narrow enough to keep my sanctuary secure. What do you want? I asked. My voice was completely flat. I felt no fear, no anger. Just a profound, Heavy exhaustion. What do we want? Cameron spat, trying to push the door, but the chain held firm. You ruined my life. Chelsea left. She went back to her parents' house. Her dad said he's going to sue us for the deposits. You completely destroyed everything. I didn't destroy anything, Cameron, I said quietly. I just stopped paying for it. There is a difference. My father pushed past Cameron, his face pale and desperate. Madeline, please. The email. Why would you send that email? You exposed us to everyone. My partners are pulling out of our firm. The country club board called me this morning. They are revoking our membership. We are ruined. We have nothing. You had me, I reminded him. And you told me you wished I would disappear. Valerie pushed her way to the crack in the door. Tears were streaming down her face, ruining what was left of her makeup. We didn't mean it, Maddie. I was just stressed about the wedding. You are our daughter. We are your blood. You cannot just throw your family out on the street. The courier came on Friday. They served us an eviction notice. You sold our home. My home, I corrected her, keeping my voice steady. It was in my name. You put it in my name to hide it from the government, remember? I simply liquidated my own asset. You are a monster, Cameron hissed. You are a cold, calculating monster. I looked at my brother. The boy who had never faced a consequence in his life was finally standing in the wreckage of his own entitlement. No, Cameron, I said. I am just an accountant. You guys spent 29 years treating me like a ledger. You only cared about my value when you needed a bailout. Well, the ledger is closed. The account is bankrupt. Valerie reached a hand through the crack in the door, trying to grab my sleeve. I stepped back, out of reach. Maddie, please, she sobbed, a genuinely ugly, broken sound. Where are we supposed to go? What are we supposed to do? We are your family. I looked at the three of them. I searched my heart for a shred of pity, a lingering attachment to the people who shared my DNA. But the space where that love used to be was entirely empty. They had hollowed it out themselves. Blood doesn't excuse betrayal, I said, my voice dropping to a quiet, absolute whisper. You didn't lose a daughter on Thursday night. You threw one away. I just made sure you felt the loss. Do not ever come to this door again. I didn't wait for a reply. I pushed the door shut, forcing Valerie to pull her hand back. I closed it tight, threw the deadbolt, and locked the handle. The heavy, metallic clicks echoed in the entryway. I stood there for a moment, listening to Cameron curse on the other side, listening to my mother cry. I thought I might feel sad. I thought I might cry myself. But I didn't. I walked back to the kitchen, picked up my mug of tea, and took a sip. It was warm and sweet. The silence in my apartment returned, wrapping around me like a protective blanket. It has been several weeks since that Sunday. The sale of the downtown penthouse closed seamlessly. The real estate investment firm wired the money, minus their cut, directly into a brand new, highly secure private account I opened at a different bank. The remaining funds from the joint investment account were transferred as well. I am currently sitting on a very comfortable, entirely legal nest egg. I heard through the grapevine, mostly through texts from my cousin Becca, that my parents had to move into a small, rented apartment in a neighborhood they used to make fun of. Bradley's business took a massive hit, and he is facing early, forced retirement. Cameron and Chelsea officially called off the engagement. Chelsea's parents practically dragged her away from him once they realized the Kensington wealth was a mirage. Cameron is currently living on my parents' cheap futon, blaming everyone but himself. As for me, I packed up my small apartment and moved to a different city, a few states away. A place where no one knows the Kensington name and no one cares. I took a portion of the funds and started my own independent financial consulting firm. I help small businesses get their books in order. I work for myself, I set my own hours, and I never, ever mix money with family. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that Thursday dinner. I think about the look of disgust on my mother's face when she told me to disappear. They wanted to erase me because my practical, logical existence ruined their beautiful, expensive fantasy. They thought I would crumble without them. They thought I needed their conditional, toxic love to survive. They didn't realize that by cutting the chains that bound me to them, they didn't destroy me. They set me free. The truest revenge isn't screaming matches or physical violence. It isn't even the financial ruin I legally engineered. The truest, most devastating revenge is living a beautiful, peaceful, successful life completely without them. It is waking up every morning knowing that my air is clean, my home is mine, and my peace is untouchable. They cast me out to protect their perfect image, but in doing so, they handed me the matches to burn their illusion to the ground. Some relatives are still blowing up my phone, telling me I went too far, that I am heartless, and that I destroyed my family for good. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for taking everything back and vanishing on my own terms? Thank you for watching this story until the end. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and tell us in the comments what you would have done in Madeline's shoes. See you in the next drama.